They say every neighborhood has that one person who can't help but play sheriff, like the world would collapse if they weren't keeping tabs on everyone else's lawn. In our town, that man was Victor Hale. He didn't wear a badge, but you'd never know it by the way he strutted down the sidewalk, clipboard tucked under his arm, snapping photos like he was building a case. And if you think that's annoying, wait until you hear what he pulled on my grandfather. Because that man picked the wrong porch to climb. It all started one early morning, about 5:30. The sky was still bruised with night, and I was half awake, pouring cereal. My grandpa sat in his old rocking chair on the porch, coffee steaming in his hand, eyes sharp even though he was 76. That's when I heard him mutter under his breath, "There he goes again." I looked up, and sure enough, Victor was scaling our backyard fence like some burglar, phone raised, taking pictures of Grandpa's tomato plants. Tomatoes. Apparently, fresh vegetables were a crime against the neighborhood's aesthetic. I wanted to storm out right then, but Grandpa just held up a hand. He had this calm way about him, like a man who'd seen far worse and didn't waste breath on fools. "Patience," he said, his voice steady. "Let a man write his own ending." Thing is, this wasn't the first time Victor had crept onto our property. Twice before, we'd caught him poking around the shed. Once he even rattled the door, muttering like he expected to find drugs or contraband. Grandpa had gone to the HOA about it, but the president, Margaret Lewis, just smiled that politician's smile and said, "Oh, Victor just cares. He's enthusiastic." Enthusiastic? Breaking state trespassing law at dawn isn't enthusiasm, that's harassment. The sheriff's office sympathized when Grandpa called, but they said unless we caught him in the act and pressed charges immediately, it was our word against his. That didn't sit right with Grandpa. He was a Korean War vet, understood patience, but he also understood planning. For 3 days, he tinkered in the garage while I passed him tools, humming those old country tunes he loved. By the 4th day, our iron gate had a new secret, a low-voltage electric wire, perfectly legal under state code as long as it was marked. Grandpa even posted a bright yellow sign, "Warning, Electrified gate. Trespassers will be shocked." And wouldn't you know it, 2 mornings later, Victor came prowling again. Grandpa sat there sipping black coffee, and I crouched by the window, heart pounding. Victor gripped the gate with his gloved hand and snap. He yelped like a dog that stuck its nose in a hornet's nest. He stumbled back, flailed into the dirt, and limped off down the street. Grandpa leaned back, eyes glinting. "That," he said, "is the sound of justice." Word traveled fast. Neighbors whispered in their driveways, laughing into their sleeves as Victor limped around trying to spin the story. He told anyone who'd listen that Grandpa had rigged illegal traps. But most folks already knew Victor's reputation measuring grass with a ruler, peeking through curtains at night. For once, people weren't buying his act. Still, Victor wasn't going to take the hit quietly. By noon, the HOA called an emergency meeting. I went with Grandpa, just in case, and it was every bit the circus we expected. Margaret sat at the head of the table, pearls around her neck, smile plastered on like a mask. Victor sat to her right with his arm in a sling, pure theater, pointing at Grandpa like he'd uncovered a terrorist cell. "This man," Victor declared, voice booming, "is endangering the neighborhood. That gate nearly killed me." Grandpa didn't flinch. He leaned forward, placed a folded paper on the table, and said evenly, "That's a state-issued permit. The wiring is legal, signed, and marked with warnings. What's illegal is trespassing, which Victor has done 3 times. Margaret tried to smooth it over, saying, "Legal or not, it's aggressive. It goes against the spirit of community living." Grandpa's voice dropped, gravelly and commanding. "Regulate? Sure. Trespass? No. North Carolina law makes it a crime to enter private property without consent. If he does it again, I won't bother with warnings. I'll let a judge handle it." The shift in the room was almost visible. Neighbors who'd been silent suddenly spoke up. One woman said, "Victor came into my yard last month measuring my shrubs. I thought I was the only one." Another added, "He photographed my kids' bikes, called them an eyesore." The tide turned right there, and Victor's face went redder with every accusation. Margaret banged the gavel, desperate to cut it off, but the damage was done. Now, if this were any other man, he might have licked his wounds and moved on. But Victor doubled down. For 2 days straight, he circled our block in his dented pickup, slowing down in front of our driveway like a vulture. Grandpa didn't acknowledge him, just sipped his coffee, eyes sharp as ever. And then, on the third night, the fool couldn't resist. I woke to the sound of rustling near the gate. Looked out my window, and there he was, flashlight in one hand, bolt cutters in the other, muttering curses. He was actually going to break through. But Grandpa was already waiting. From his rocking chair, he pulled out a little handheld remote, looked at me with that sly grin, and whispered, "Watch this." The moment Victor clamped the cutters onto the steel, Grandpa clicked the button. A low hum surged through the wires, and Victor jolted like he grabbed a live hive of bees. He yelped, dropped the cutters, and stumbled back into the mud. Grandpa calmly sipped his coffee. "Trespassing again," he muttered, then lifted his phone, recording the whole fiasco in crisp HD. Every stutter, every curse, every slip-it was all captured. But Victor wasn't finished. Oh no. He whipped out his phone and called 911, screaming, "Attempted murder. He's trying to kill me with an illegal fence." Within minutes, the yard was washed in red and blue lights. Officers stepped out, hands near their holsters, eyes darting between Victor, muddy, trembling, clutching his Armand grandpa, who sat like it was just another Thursday night. "Sir," one officer asked, "is there an active electrical device on that gate?" "Yes," Grandpa answered calmly, sliding over the laminated permit. "Registered, permitted, posted with warnings, and recorded. Here's the paperwork." Then he handed over his phone, video still rolling. The officers watched Victor climb, cut, and fry himself. One officer looked up, deadpan. "So, you trespassed?" Victor sputtered. "No, I was conducting an inspection for the HOA." The other officer raised an eyebrow. "At midnight? With bolt cutters?" That was it. Under state law, Victor had just racked up criminal trespassing, vandalism, attempted theft, and filing a false police report. They cuffed him right there in front of the glowing gate. Neighbors, woken by the commotion, gathered in the street. And for the first time, they weren't whispering. They were clapping. Grandpa leaned back, nodded at me, and said softly, "Sometimes, justice just needs a little electricity." Victor sat in the back of the cruiser, drenched in sweat, his reputation shredded. The HOA badge he'd never officially had, but always flaunted, was gone. The gate he thought he could conquer had turned into the very thing that destroyed him. And here's the thing, I don't tell this story because it's funny, though I'll admit, watching him yelp and flail was satisfying. I tell it because it shows what happens when people let power, even fake power, twist their judgment. The HOA tried to cover for him. Neighbors were too scared to speak, and he thought he was untouchable. But when one stubborn old man stood his ground, the truth came out, and suddenly everyone realized they weren't alone in hating the petty tyrant. That night changed our street. Folks started speaking up, challenging HOA nonsense instead of shrugging it off. Margaret's grip on the board weakened, and people began demanding accountability. All because one man, with a rocking chair and a cup of black coffee, refused to be bullied. Now, some say Grandpa went too far, that electrifying a gate is extreme. Others say Victor got exactly what he deserved, and maybe then some. That's where I leave it to you. Was this justice, or was it payback gone too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because trust me, this debate never ends at just one fence. And if you've ever had a neighbor like Victor, you know exactly what I mean. So tell me down below, whose side are you on?